you that he finished the programs. He was loyal to President Kennedy and tried to finish his programs. Number one, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, that was the March on Washington. But he tried very hard to complete the programs by President Kennedy. But he did run to for his own term in 1964, kind of moved out of Kennedy's shadow, and he decided not to run for re-election in '68, mainly due to the pressures of what? Vietnam War. Very good. That did not treat him well. We'll talk about that as we go. Now, according to historians, I think this is a great quote. There was no doubt that President Johnson's downfall was the war in Southeast Asia, the Vietnam War. They stated, quote, he was obsessed by it, possessed by it, and ruined by it. Everybody remembers Lyndon Johnson for the Vietnam War. He did a lot of good things. But he's remembered for the Vietnam War, and historians say that he was obsessed by the Vietnam War, he was possessed by the Vietnam War, and he was ruined by it. And we'll get into that later. Well, after the inauguration of Richard Nixon in January of 1969, LBJ returned to his ranch in Texas. Okay, after he left the presidency, he returned to his ranch in Texas. And what did he do? He did the same thing all presidents do. He published his memoirs and opened the Lyndon B. Johnson Library, which is actually at the University of Texas at Austin. So if you go to the University of Texas, that library there is named after Lyndon Johnson, and that's what presidents do. Well, in 1972, he suffered a second heart attack and survived. In 1972, he suffered a second heart attack and survived. But he could not survive the third and died on January 22nd, 1973. Didn't live long after the presidency. So in 1972, he suffered a second heart attack and survived. However, he could not survive a third and died on January 22nd, 1973.
Is his ranch like still in the family? I guess that wasn't probably much of a working ranch.
No, it's a historical site right now, but it's still there, owned by the family. Well, it's owned by the Historical Society. You know, they donated it, but it's still there. Yeah. It wasn't much of a working ranch, but it was a big ranch. Well, President Johnson's body laid in state. Where did Kennedy's body lay in state? What's that? Capitol Rotunda. Johnson's laid in state at the Lyndon B. Johnson Library in Texas, and then also under the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C. But his body first laid in state at his library in Texas, then later his body was transported to the Capitol Rotunda. Well, he was not buried in Arlington. There's only two presidents of the United States buried in Arlington. That would be President Kennedy and President Taft. He was buried at his family graveyard on the ranch in Stonewall, Texas. That's where he is buried. He's not buried in Arlington. Lady Bird Johnson never remarried after the death of her husband, and she dedicated her life to the Highway Beautification Act, which we'll talk about. You know what that is? That's those signs out there. It says that this area is cleaned by the 4-H or whatever. That's part of the Highway Beautification Act. And she also dedicated her life to the National Wildflower Research Center. And that was simply a nonprofit organization that preserved and reintroduced native plants in the United States. When we walk from Arlington Cemetery to across the Potomac River Bridge, we're going to walk by a park that was dedicated to that thing that she did. And you'll see it. But anyway, she never remarried after the death of her husband. She dedicated her life to both the Highway Beautification Act, which we'll talk about, and the National Wildlife Research Center. She died on July 11, 2007, at the age of 94. Lady Bird Johnson died on July 11, 2007, at the age of 94. Here's a picture of Lady Bird right here, signature. Okay, that gives us a little idea about President Johnson. We'll kind of go from there. Okay, what I want to do is I want to take a little time here and talk about a couple of things and show you a video. Yep.
1 minute.
Okay, that'd be good. All right, I want to show you the video I talked about yesterday on Cecil Stout and those items.